Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call to order the Finance and Governance Committee for February 8th, 2022 to order. And we're going to have Diego help us out with our Star Wars. That was produced by Mr. Nguyen.
Yes, sir. I'll take the blame.
It works. It works. There we go. No, we're unique.
This is the throwback silent movie version.
Yeah, we're way ahead of the program here. Okay. Thank you, Diego. And Madam Clerk, roll call and posting of the agenda.
Member Basua,
Here.
Member Tehran,
Here.
Chair Zaragoza.
Here.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on the City Hall Bulletin Board on February 1st, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, our next item is public comments not on the agenda, and my understanding is, Madam Clerk, that we have one speaker that'd like to speak, and that's Henry Alvarado Sapien.
Mayor, Mr. Alvarado Sapien is not available for public comment at this time. However, I will go ahead and start the 3-minute timer. Thank
We'll
you.
start the 3 minutes. If there's anyone else that'd like to call in, we're for public comments not on the agenda. Right now, we have the 3-minute rule, and you can always call in. And we'll wait for also maybe Henry Alvarado Sapien might
And
be available during that time.
The number to do so, if you want to call in, is at the bottom of the screen that you are viewing.
The bottom of the screen is the number to call in. Thank you, City Attorney.
And Mayor, this is Sherry Klima. While we have a pause, we wanted to request, please, if you all would allow us to move to table items D2 and D3.
Okay.
That's D2 is the Second Amendment to the Superior and Central Square Software License Agreement. And item D3 is the budget mid-year review. We're not quite ready to come forward with those two items.
Okay, Madam Clerk, so we're going to pull item D2 and D3.
3, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So anybody that's is waiting for that, those two items have been pulled, for additional information for a future agenda. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mhm. Okay, so Councilman Tehran.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick thing regarding the two items we just tabled. If I can ask Ms. Klima, for item D3 for the mid-year budget review, does that affect when it comes to council for review as well? Will it be coming back to this committee first?
Yes, we'll be coming in 2 weeks back to this committee and then council thereafter. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Mhm. Okay, and I understand that the city manager is going to sing a song for us during the 3 minutes.
Not this week, sir.
No, that's tomorrow,
Please, no,
right?
not tomorrow.
Okay, so,
I would like to ask if anyone here has ever eaten one of these.
oh, no, I don't think I have.
Can you see that?
No.
It's a pickled in tapatio sauce.
Tapatio sauce, my goodness, that sounds, and we're hungry and you're doing that right now to us. Comes up to Ron, what do you think of the city manager? Basua?
Well, I would say that I certainly haven't had one, but I'm willing to try one.
Let us know how it is, Mr. City Manager, after you've tried it.
Thank you. So, any speakers? No speakers.
No speakers. Thank
Ok-
you, Mayor.
Okay, so our next item is a consent item, and this is item number C1 from the City Clerk's Department, approval of the minutes, that the Finance and Governance Committee approve the minutes of Jan 2025, 2022 regular meeting as presented. Council members, any concerns on this item? If not, a motion be proper at this time.
I'll move to accept the minutes as written.
Okay, I've got a
I will
first.
second.
First by Councilman Turan, second by Councilman Basua. Roll call.
Member Turan,
Yes.
Member Basua,
Aye.
Chair Zaragoza.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, our next item is item D1. This is the Finance Department. This is purchase order under PO 8173 to increase request for Tri-County office furniture. And the recommendation that the Finance and Governance Committee recommend to the City Council to authorize the mayor to execute an amendment for the purchase order 8173 with Tri-County office furniture to increase the purchase order by $300,000 for the total amount not to exceed $500,000 for the purchase and installation of office furniture. And my understanding is that we have quite a few members going to be joining the city, and we're going to need office renovations and accommodations for additional staff members, and also to upgrade the workstations for the current staff. And again, you know, this item was pre-recorded required under Measure M presentations. Council members and Councilmember Turan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And you alluded to it already, but I'm just hoping that we could, just for the benefit of the public, get a quick synopsis on what we have in front of us. I think anyone who hasn't seen the pre-recorded video, which they're required to view ahead of time if they want to see it, because it's prohibited from being shown live tonight. Can we just explain, when we say new furniture, we're not getting, you know, a beautiful, you know, credenza for the city manager's office here. We're talking about furniture as in cubicle partitions and ergonomic furniture for our employees, as well as some other build outs of some of the departments, as well as the South Oxnard library. Is that correct?
Wait, we're not?
This is really basically to accommodate, you know, the new folks, and also to upgrade the workstations. But who wants to give us some additional information on this item? Who can do that?
Sure, I can do that. Member Turan and Mayor Zaragoza. We have several areas, excuse me, within the city that are either needing to accommodate additional staff, which is at the police department. They have additional financing staff coming in, and then also to improve the flow of the detective area. So that's a portion of the project. And then at the fire department for the And I know Chief, looking behind my camera, so Chief Hamilton is here as well. And so there's some remodel work for 8 additional employees to accommodate 8 additional employees. And again, Member Toronto alluded to it, it's meeting room furniture at South Oxnard Library, community development. There's some older chairs there that need to be replaced. Quite a bit of wear and tear. I believe they're about 15 years old, the chairs. And then ergonomic needs for specific employees. So all total, we're requesting an increase of $300,000 for Tri-County office furniture.
And I understand too that furniture so old is no longer functional for use, you know, for what we need. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and
That was my question. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. George.
thank you. And Chief Hamilton, anything you might like to share regarding this furniture that you desperately need over at the fire department? Okay. Probably Chief Hamilton's muted, but that's okay, Chief.
I think he's canceling his order of the credenza.
The credenza. You said cancel the credenza? Just kidding. Okay. What's the pleasure of the board on this item?
I will move the recommended action, Mayor.
Okay,
second.
First by Councilman Basu and second by Turan. Roll call. And of course, we started the 3-minute item on this. That was about a minute ago that. Do we have any speakers on this item?
We do not have any public
speakers.
speakers. Thank you, Mayor.
But we started the clock here. Okay.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Basua, a second by Councilmember Turan. Member Basua,
Aye.
Chair Zaragoza,
I'm.
Member Turan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, our last item is a really important item, and this is, as you know, we pulled the D2, the Information Technology Department, and also the budget for future agendas. So we have number 4. This is the Finance Department. The subject of Calpers pension liability update. And the presentation is the unfunded accrual liability, UAL concepts of restructuring the UAL for a lower interest rate and the recommendation to initiate a validation process. So the recommendation is that the Finance Governance Committee, 1, receive a presentation from the city municipal advisors on the current status and projection for the Calpers pension program and discuss the concept of restructuring the city's UAL, the unfunded liability update, and provide, number 2, provide feedback to staff and the municipal advisor as to whether a validation process should be initiated in order to preserve future options for restructuring the UAL initially at a lower interest rate from Calpers that is charging the city on the UAL. And I think one of the important things here is preserve future options, I think is really important for all of us. And number 3, if yes, and number 2 above, recommend that the city council approve a resolution authorizing the initiation of a validation process in the form of a trust agreement. And I understand that we have the consultant, it's available. And Betsy George, would you like to start off or?
Yes, well, we are going to have a.
And we're going to start the 3 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have a live presentation that NHA advisors will lead. Mr. Craig Hill and Mike Meyer are here from our municipal advisors. And then also for any questions that may come up, we have Russ Trice here from Norton Rose and Fulbright, the law firm that's assisting us
Okay.
with analyzing the various options that are available to the city.
And is Craig going to start?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, good evening. This is Craig Hill with NHA Advisors. Just before I turn it over to Mike Meyer at our office, I'd like to just say this is a continuation of an education process and analysis process that we've been doing with the city now going on 3 or 4 years. So we hope to provide some updated information and talk through some of the action steps that are required. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike Meyer, who runs our pension group. Thank you.
Welcome, Mike. Mhm.
Thanks, Craig, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and committee members. Mike Meyer with NHA. As Craig mentioned, this is a continuation of several workshops that we started with the city back in early 2018. We had 4 workshops, both with the Fiscal Policy Task Force and then with the Finance and Governance Committee to provide updates on Calpers' rising pension costs. We also started to introduce various cost management strategies for the city to consider in the spring of 19 pre-pandemic. It's the objective of staff and NHA to continue this evaluation process this spring. And so tonight we're just going to provide a brief update on kind of where the city of Oxnard stands with Calpers, reintroduce some of those cost management strategies, and then talk about the process that we envision for the next several months to evaluate those options. So first, just to redefine the challenge that the city's facing, this is a challenge that all cities across the state are facing. That is that you have a large debt with Calpers. This debt is known as the unfunded accrued liability, also known as the UAL. And that UAL is the shortfall between what the city is required to have in assets to fully pay out retiree benefits versus what it actually has in assets. And so this bar chart here on the right depicts your figures from the recent Calpers report. So Calpers says that you should have about 1.1 billion in that account. However, you have about 805 million. So that gap there, that 323 million is the UAL debt. It's a large number. Obviously, Calpers doesn't expect that to be repaid all at once. They do amortize that just like a mortgage or a loan over a period of time, but they do charge the city an interest rate on that debt. They have been charging you 7%. That's going down to 6.8% next year. The UAL for the city of Oxnard has grown pretty rapidly. 11 years ago, that number was under 100 million. It's now over 300 million, grown primarily due to Calpers not meeting their investment targets and also changing their assumptions. There is some good news, and that is with the stock market having impressive increases over the last several years. Calpers did earn 21.3% last year. We do expect that will reduce the city's unfunded liability down to about 250 million. In terms of the payments that the city's been making on this debt, those have doubled in the last 5 to 6 years. So there was a chart in the staff report, a bar chart that looked at historical UAL payments as well as projected. And what that shows is that the city was paying about 12 million on that debt just as recently as 2015 and 2016. That number is now up to 24 million. And in addition to paying down this UAL debt, the city also makes what's called a normal cost contribution each year. And that's a payment to keep up with current employees. So combined, that's about $40 million going to Calpers annually right now for pension expenses. On slide 5 here, as you are well aware, the city does collect a voter-approved property override tax since the early 1950s. That tax goes towards paying a portion of the safety police and safety fire plans. And each year the city works with its actuary to determine what amount can legally be collected from that override. The other constraint on that levy is that there is a maximum levy that the city can charge its residents, and that's 0.0776% of AV. So for a homeowner that owned a house that was valued at $500,000, that's about $380 annually. There is going to be a significant amount of additional analysis this spring, but based on the preliminary analysis, we do expect that that levy is going to be at or near the maximum amount for the foreseeable future, at least the next 10 years. And what that means is that if there is any additional UAL that gets added on in the future, the city won't have the ability to really increase that tax. So all of that burden would be on the general fund, as well as other city funds like water and wastewater. The options on this slide are cost management strategies that we introduced to the committee back in 2019. The first three options are all viable options for the city right now. The fourth option, which is the restructuring concept, is not viable yet. There is a process that's required to preserve that option, and we'll get into that in a couple of slides. But just to touch on each of these briefly, the first option is to prepay the UAL first thing in the fiscal year. The city does this already. You do achieve a slight discount, which is helpful. The second option is to actually ask Calpers for a new repayment schedule that's more level through a fresh start program. The downside of that is that they do require the term on that to be shorter, which means you pay higher annually. There's not a lot of cities that have opted for this option just because it does require higher payments. The most popular option that other cities have been utilizing is to use cash reserves or budgetary surplus to essentially pay extra to pay down that debt faster. And there's two primary vehicles that we'll be evaluating this spring. The first is to set up a Section 115 trust. And the second is to actually just send that money to Calpers to directly pay down the UAL. But again, very popular options. There's probably 300 to 400 Calpers members across the state that are utilizing these strategies. The last option is restructuring the UAL at a lower interest rate. When we introduced this concept in early 19, we did not feel that was a viable option. There had only been 2 or 3 cities in the last decade at that point in time who were able to successfully restructure the UAL. That has dramatically changed in the last 2 years. We've seen about 80 to 90 Calpers members restructure the UAL by issuing a pension bond, really for 2 primary reasons. One is to lower the interest rate on that debt. So instead of paying Calpers the 6.8%, they've borrowed money on the bond at anywhere from 2.5% to 4.5%. Rates have been at pretty low levels for the last couple of years. And then secondly, the second benefit is to smooth out those pension payments at a lower level to help with budget predictability and create cash flow savings for the city. As I mentioned, it does require a court validation process, which we'll get to. That takes about 4 to 5 months before this option becomes a viable option for the city. There is also risk associated with the UAL restructuring. Savings is dependent on Calpers' future returns. That is something that we would want to do a lot of due diligence on this spring, work with the city's actuary to really quantify that risk so that all the decision makers and staff and NHA are well informed in the spring. Just to graphically depict the concept of restructuring, we wanted to present this chart on slide 7. And what this is showing in the blue bars is the payment shape that you currently have with Calpers to pay down that $320 million of debt. And then what we did was we looked at a hypothetical restructuring where you would actually smooth out those payments that's shown in the orange dotted line at a lower level. So creating budgetary savings, creating savings for residents and taxpayers, as well as creating additional resiliency in the future. I just touched on a few of the benefits, but on slide 8, we did summarize some of the potential benefits and why the city may want to consider a restructuring. Number 1, reducing the interest rate. As I mentioned, the 85 to 90 or so agencies that have recently restructured their UAL obtained rates anywhere between 2.5 and 4.25%. So quite a bit lower than the 6.8% that Calpers is charging. We do project that there would be a significant amount of interest savings. Those savings would be divided up between the city and residents. So we do project that the PTO levy would be able to be lowered by a significant amount on residents, so their tax bills would go down. We also project that the city general fund as well as the utility funds would also save a significant amount of money as well by lowering that interest rate. And then very lastly, at the bottom of slide 8, and I think from our perspective, a very important benefit is future resiliency. When you lower your annual debt payment, you are freeing up additional budgetary capacity to handle future economic shocks. So, potential revenue declines in the future, potential new UAL that could get added, you would have additional capacity there to absorb those shocks. The last couple slides here, just on the process, as I mentioned before, these are all rather complex options. There's a lot of financial analysis that needs to go into fully identifying the pros, the cons, as well as the risks of each option. And so we do envision a 3 to 4 month process this spring where we evaluate all of these in greater detail and come back to the committee with the results of that analysis. As I mentioned, the UAL restructuring option is not viable right now. It does require a court validation process. Historically, those have taken 3 to 4 months, but with COVID, we've seen these take 4, 5, 6 months, sometimes a little bit more. It's different in each county. The validation process does not lock the city into issuing a pension bond, but it does provide you with the opportunity to do so in the future. So whether that's later this year or whether it's 5 or 10 years down the road, you do need to have a validation in place in order to execute a restructuring. So I think the recommendation, just for efficiency purposes, is to run that process concurrently with the evaluation process so that in the summer or fall of this year, the city would be in a position to execute on one or more of those strategies. So I think at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Craig or Russ. If I missed anything, please chime in, but I think I'll bring it back to staff maybe for the recommendation or open it up to questions.
Okay, I have some questions before we go to staff. Just for the public's sake, this numbers that grown from 94 million in 2010 to 322 million in 21 is just tremendous, that tremendous amount of increase there. And I think it's really important that the public understand that. And my understanding too, Mike, that 153 million is for miscellaneous and 169 for public safety. That's correct, right?
Yes, right now the safety is at about 169 million and the miscellaneous about 153. So I think those are the numbers you quoted.
And one of the things too that I think the current rate is 6.8, and we had an investment gain of 21.3%. And the difference there is going to help us. How much is that going to help us? With that 21.3 investment gain.
Yeah, so next fall, when the new reports are released, Calpers will incorporate the benefit of that big 21.3% gain. So we do think that $320 million UAL will drop down to about $250 million. But
that's probably about a $50 million gain there, right?
That's right, about 50 to 70 million of a gain.
The other thing, Mike, that I'll let the council members talk about it. We're on slide 3, where you said the shortfall. A shortfall is 323, and the actual value of the city is 805 million compared to the 1.2 billion. Traditionally, I've heard in the past that a healthy, if you want to call it a healthy shortfall, is about 80%. And we're at, is that what, if my numbers are correct, are we at 60 some percent? Is that correct?
High 60s, 70%.
Yeah, high 67. That's what I computed. So I just wanted to find out if my math is right. But my understanding that potentially agencies like to see maybe 80 and above. Is that correct?
There's a lot of different opinions out there, but I would say generally speaking, anywhere between 80 and 95 A lot of the agencies who have funded their UAL through these restructurings have targeted that low 90s to mid 90s threshold. Some have gone even smaller and targeted the 80s, but anywhere above 80.
And the other question I have is evaluating the merits of the UAL restructuring, to cut the rate in half. You talk about lowering the interest rate from the 6.80 to 3.25 or 3.75. My question is, if we recommend to the city council that you come back in 6 months with different options, what guarantees do we have that it's going to be 3.25 and 3.75? Could potentially that be higher? Would that change things, or when you come back with the different options to evaluate that?
Yes, great question. No guarantees. That's a big risk. Interest rates, in 2020, just to give you some perspective, when a lot of the cities started to issue these bonds, rates were at around 4%. We saw a big drop in rates down to the 2.5% level. Most cities actually in 2021 borrowed at anywhere from 2.5% to 3%, which was by far the lowest we've ever seen. In the last 2 months, we've seen a quick jump just based on inflationary fears. So I think we're looking at the 3.5% level now. That could be very different in 1 month's time. It could be lower, it could be a lot higher. At some point, these restructurings don't make a lot of sense if interest rates were to go up quite a bit higher.
And I think you mentioned that too, that potentially the recommendation 6 months from now would be, where do we stand on whether it's 3.75 or whatever number it is at that time. And I have a couple of more questions, and I'll let council members talk about. One of the affordability here is that over the years, we can save up to $35 million over the next 12 years, which is very significant. I think, that's really important that the public understand that. And number three, of course, and then the PTO, I think, is really important too, that we lower that to some number. And of course, I think you mentioned if we don't, then in the next decade or so, we're looking at exceeding that what is it, 0.77 number? I can't remember which one it is. Then that's, I think, is really important. So, council members, that's all the questions I have. Councilmember Turan or Basua?
I don't have any questions, Mayor. Thank you.
No public speakers at this time. We've gone to 3 minutes with no additional. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilor Basua.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, Councilman Turan.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Meyer and NHA for the presentation. Just a really quick question about the restructuring option. There was another slide different than this. I think it was slide 6. Yes, this one. I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit where it says about 80 plus Calpers members have restructured some or all of their UAL in the last 2 years. Do we have a sense for what types of organizations those were? Were they large municipalities or special or school districts, or all the above? I'm just wondering about size and scale compared to the city of Oxnard.
Yeah, so the vast majority have been cities out of the 80, and all sizes. I'd say we've worked with several that are larger than Oxnard, Riverside, Torrance, Chula Vista, all issued bonds, 3 to 500 million. Also, lots of small cities that have unfunded liabilities of less than 25 million. So it really spans the whole spectrum of sizes. A lot of the cities that issued are listed in the staff report. There's probably about 40 or 50 listed there. Many cities that also collect a similar property tax override have also done these UAL restructurings as well. So those cities are listed in the staff report.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And then my last question I have is, can you expand a little bit on the property tax override? Just to explain for folks who are watching here, I know there was a slide that had it touched on, but you can just expand on that a little bit so folks understand what that is and what it goes toward as a property tax override for what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so the city has had a voter-approved property tax override. It's a very nuanced calculation by an actuary as to how much legally you can collect on that, and they go through that analysis each year. But I think from an estimate, it's about 70% of the unfunded liability of the safety plans that can be paid from that override. And so the idea is that if you are to, pay off that portion of the debt through a restructuring, you bring down the payments because you've lowered the interest rate, and it means that you don't have to assess residents the same level of a tax. You can actually lower that tax because you've lowered your debt payment, so you could bring down your the levy to match that payment.
Okay, thank you. And just to kind of put a bow on that one, for the override, when we look specifically at the city of Oxnard, what tangibly does that look like at the end of the day when that is assessed on our residents? What does that go towards?
So Member Taran, that particular assessment can only be used to pay for the safety pension unfunded liability. So it's fire and police only. So it's not, there's many employees of the city that aren't covered by that override, their pension or the unfunded liability portion of it.
Thank you. That answers the question. I just wanted to have it clear for the public that what that assessment goes towards and how it can only go towards that. So thank you, Mr. Meyer. Thank you, Ms. George.
Thank you. I have another question here. In the potential or the options you're going to share with us, how about the option of saving X amount of dollars and reserves every single year from each department and into the general fund for the cost? Is that a viable option that we can save X amount of dollars in reserves for that and a separate maybe account or trust account for that? I think,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take that question real quick.
Okay. I think you're muted there. Alex, we can't hear you.
Mr. Mayor, what you're talking about down here is in the, I believe that's green. And,
Alex, we missed what you said up until now.
oh, sorry. If you,
Okay.
so we already do what's at the top of this slide, right? The prepaying early, we already do that. I would not recommend the fresh start one, the next option. And then in the green box, the one you're raising here is having to do with the lump sum down payment, right?
Right.
For the discretionary payments. And I believe that's what you mean when you say if we save money each year,
Right.
can we, this is like paying a little bit extra on your monthly mortgage in addition to the mortgage note. I think that's what you're alluding to.
You're paying more into the principal every time is
Right.
potentially.
Right. So
Okay.
that I would recommend if and when we're able to do it.
Okay.
But we certainly strongly recommend what's before you tonight in terms of taking the steps necessary in order to restructure. And the primary thing I can say is to your earlier question, obviously we can't guarantee what the interest rates will be like when this comes back after we do all of our due diligence and get through the validation process. We don't know what that number will be, and we will recommend the council taking action depending on what those numbers come out to be at that time. But what we do know right now is the 6.8 that we're currently paying, that's guaranteed.
Right.
Right. So I think what NHA has brought and is recommending to us is something we strongly recommend. Thank you.
Thank you. And also on the pension obligation bonds, and your report mentioned that if we did go that route, that we have fiscal stability, taxpayer saves money, we have budgeting, savings, we have a modified maturity plan, we have leverage that can really help us tremendously if we go that route with a POB, with a pension obligation bond. Is that correct? Mr. Nguyen, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Yes, I was just nodding yes, but I was looking for
Okay.
Craig Hill to jump in as well. He's the expert here.
Craig, is that correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Mayor, with the idea with that this would be by implementing a restructuring, it provides a number of benefits to the city to tackle a whole handful of different issues, including building up reserves and having savings on the expenditure side for your cost of operations.
My last question is, and I'm trying to find my notes here, that we have to go to the court in order to potentially come out with the POBs. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's what we're asking tonight, is just to move forward with the recommendation for council to approve a resolution initiating the validation process.
And again, I think, as mentioned before, that this is just a starting process. We're not buying the bonds. We're not doing anything. It's just a process initial thing to start the process, correct?
Right. This will be back in front of the committee and council at least once, if not twice.
Okay, so council members, any other questions? Do we have any, Madam Clerk, any speakers on this item? I know we got the 3 minutes already.
No public speakers. Thank you, Mayor.
So the council members, the recommendation here is to receive the presentation we have from the municipal advisors on the current status and projections for the Calpers pension program, and then to discuss a restructuring of the city's UAL, and also to provide a feedback, to staff, which I think we have to some degree, and to validate the process and initiate an order to preserve future options of restructuring of the UL, and initially to lower the interest rate and the Calpers charging the city of Oxnard and the UAL debt. And the recommendation, if we do that, number 2, then that recommended number 2 be sent to the city council for approval and on a resolution authorizing the initiation of a validation process in form of trust agreement. I'd like to make a motion to approve this item.
I will second, Mayor.
Second, that's again, item number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, it's a motion from Zaragoza, second by Tehran. Roll call.
Member Tehran,
Yes.
Member Basua,
Aye.
Chair Zaragoza.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0.
And I just want to share, this is a very complex issue, the UAL, but it's something that we need to handle, that we need to take care of. And to me, it's like refinancing your house. If you're paying 6.8% interest rate, we could potentially bring it down to 3% and save quite a bit of money. So that's a good analogy. That's exactly what we're doing. That's going to save us monies in the city and at home. It'll give you money to buy a house, a car, to buy furniture, to send the kids to school and so forth. That's basically what we're doing here with our budget and the unfunded liability for Calpers. And I just want to thank again the NHA, and Craig and Mike, and also we have Stefan, the bondholder, that potential bondholder that helped us out. So with that in mind, any other questions? If not, then item has been approved. And thank you so much. That's the last item here on our agenda for council members. Any items for future agenda, council members?
No items, Mayor.
None. Okay. Councilman Basua?
None, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned, and we'll be back with the Public Works at about 8:30. Thank you so much, and thank you to all the participants. Thank you.